Welcome everyone to another Observability Clinic. Today's topic is the Observability Guide to Platform Engineering, Part 1. Today we talk about Platform Observability and Success KPIs. It's September 2023. There will be, as Part 1 indicates, multiple parts to this. But let's get started right away. So first of all, what will you learn today? I will give a brief introduction on my perspective of platform engineering. I will then talk about platform engineering at Dynatrace, because we at Dynatrace, we also use Dynatrace for our platforms that our developers use to push out code. And then, as I said, we have a couple of hands-on tutorials. The nice thing about all of this is you can follow my steps. These are the 3 links I just posted for the people that are attending live. I will repost it in the comments because I see a couple of people just joined in the last minute. So in the chat, for those of you that are live on Zoom, this is where you can either get access and get your own Dynatrace trial tenant, access the playground tenants, the second link, and the third one. This is really where all of my hands-on tutorials live. Please do me a favor, memorize these links, because at least the last one, the GitHub repository, this is where I keep extending and putting more stuff out there. Now, next thing, today, I created a handful of new tutorials. They're all available on that particular tenant. And let me just show you quickly. I want to give you an option today. So this is the GitHub repository, right? And if you are scrolling down here, this is the stuff that I've used in my recent What is Dynatrace and How to Get Started. But I added a couple of notebooks to the Observability Guide to Platform Engineering. And the one here, let me just open this one. And I'm also going to copy that link into the chat in case you don't see it, right? So this is kind of the notebook that I will use as a starting point later on in the hands-on part. I will have a couple of slides before I go into the hands-on. I know some of you are seasoned Dynatrace users, and you may have heard me speak about platform engineering. So in case you want to drift off a little bit or want to just check out what I've prepared for you, feel free to just on your own pace check this out. But let me go back to my slides, because I have a couple of things that I want to tell you. First of all, introduction to platform engineering, the motivation, the architecture, and building blocks, the way I see it from a platform engineering perspective. By the way, if you have questions and you're live, use the Q&A feature. If you watch this either on YouTube, on Dynatrace University, or in the replay later on, either leave a comment on that platform, send me a message. If you have questions, leave it on the community. That's also fine. But if you're live, leverage the fact that we have a Q&A here, live Q&A. So into the platform engineering. If you want to learn more about my thoughts on platform engineering, I recently did a talk at KCD Munich, Kubernetes Community Days in Munich, that is, where I talked about the platform engineering opportunity. There's a YouTube video out there, as you can see. There's slides on SlideShare. I put everything out there as my role as a CNCF Ambassador. I'm very happy to share my thoughts, my material. So everything is out there. You can see my full story about why I believe platform engineering is here to stay and is solving a problem that we have right now with the complexity that Kubernetes gives us. So talking about the complexity, I've been talking about DevOps for the last 10 plus years, and I was really driven by the "you built it, you run it" statement that was put out years ago by Amazon, but it feels like it doesn't scale anymore. It doesn't scale anymore because we're no longer dealing with simple systems where we have a build tool, a deployment tool, and a simple monitoring tool. We have many more complexities that comes in with the cloud native landscape. And therefore, individual teams typically can't run end-to-end everything that they do. Also, right, we cannot just hire software engineers that have all the capabilities, from knowing how to do application development, deployment, security, observability, scaling, Kubernetes. It's just impossible, right? And I think this is actually why platform engineering is actually here to solve this problem. And I want to start with a quote from Kelsey Hightower, who I was really lucky that I met him twice, and I had him on stage at one of our conferences. Kelsey years ago said, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. It's a better place to start, and it's not the end game. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now organizations do when they invest in platform engineering. They really build on top of Kubernetes platforms that make it easier for engineering teams to push out code again, make it as simple as it was 10, 15 years ago, quote unquote simple, obviously, and make it as simple, even though underneath we have a very complex environment like the cloud native landscape. So for me, platform engineering is about enabling 10x organizations by simplifying the whole process of delivery and also operations. This is what I should have added here. And some of the cool facts that are out there that show that this actually works is in the State of DevOps report. I encourage everyone to download that as well in case you haven't seen it. Now, I've also very fortunate, besides working with the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and the different groups within that organization, I'm also very fortunate to work with a lot of you, a lot of our Dynatrace community members. And over the last couple of years, we came up really with what is actually a kind of reference architecture of a so-called internal development platform, and how does Dynatrace fit in? First, let me start from the top. Why are we building, again, these platforms? I think in the end, what these platforms are supposed to do is providing self-service capabilities and features to the end users, developers, your testers, your security folks, your SREs, your operations. Self-service to really deliver value to your company, whether it's self-service onboarding, progressive tool. You can see these are typically some of the use cases that these platforms provide. Now, underneath the hood, we do have a platform. We do have a technical platform that runs on any type of infrastructure, that runs most likely these days, at least the people that I talk to, most of them are based on some type of Kubernetes or container-based orchestration flavor. The platform itself, Kubernetes is not enough. You have platform services, whether it's service meshes, whether it's data storage, whether it's security vaults, whether it's policy agents. You see a lot of logos here from tools that I see being used. Also delivery services. There are tools in the space that I commonly see, whether it's Argo or Flux, whether it's still some Jenkins for CI, whether it's Bitbucket, whether it's GitHub, GitLab. There's so many tools out there that are typically part of that platform. And as you can see here, Dynatrace has a very prominent space because Dynatrace provides observability and automation and security. And with workflows inside Reliability Guardian, a great way to validate that everything you do in that platform actually works as expected. Now, the picture is not complete yet. I think what's very important, if you're building a platform, you want to make sure that platform is available, it's resilient, and it's secure on its own, the platform itself, because if the platform is not available and your developers cannot use it, it doesn't scale, it's not resilient, then your developers will not use it. They will go off and do something themselves or go to some other offering that it might be out there. So you need to make sure that your platform is as available, as resilient, and as secure as the business critical apps that you want your developers to build with that platform. And then very important, like with any other product, you're building a product, right? A platform, an IDP, an internal development platform is a product. And you want to measure if this product is used. How many active users do you have? Net Promoter Score, space metrics, DORA metrics, the DevOps metrics about how actively are your developers using it, how many features are being pushed out, how many new apps, new services are they pushing out. And then also platforms runs on infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't come for free. So you want to make sure that you also invest in FinOps and optimize utilization of your platform. And we'll talk about a lot of these things today. Now, where does Dynatrace and how does Dynatrace fit in? Dynatrace fits in because there's a lot of observability data that can be collected from any layer. It has to be collected from any layer of your stack. And this is where Dynatrace comes in, right? We do everything from traces, metrics, logs, all the way to business events, security vulnerabilities, network, everything. All of this data, if you are new to Dynatrace, can be captured either through our one agent. We can do it through the API, our support for open telemetry or other extension options. This data then, and this is unique in the marketplace, gets stored in Grail, which is a purpose-built data store for all events, for all logs, for all traces. So really for all pillars of observability, a single data store where the data is not stored in silos, but connected with the topology model that we have, which is Smartscape. All of this gets fed to Davis AI, our causal AI, that can then give you answers in case there's any challenges or if you have any questions. It's very easy to get this out. We have a Dynatrace query language. We have automation engine where you can build automation on top of data. And we also allow you to build even your own apps with App Engine. Right? So in the end, our motto has always been answer-driven automation and security. And I think it perfectly fits into modern platforms. So this was my first part of my presentation, kind of like giving a quick overview of what platform engineering is all about. Now, the next thing I want to remind you about, what do we do as Dynatrace from a platform engineering perspective, because I want to not just tell you what I think people should do, but I also show you what we do at Dynatrace to prove the point that we are using Dynatrace on a day-to-day basis. Dynatrace is using Dynatrace to monitor Dynatrace from dev to prod. And I want to now focus on a couple of things that I've learned from my colleagues when I interviewed them on how they're using it on a day-to-day basis as it comes to our Kubernetes-based platforms. So first of all, right, we are monitoring our Kubernetes clusters, whether it's the dev clusters, the staging, or the prod clusters, just as we want you to monitor it. We are using the one agent very heavily because the one agent gives us automated full stack visibility. We're also ingesting, obviously, OpenTelemetry data because a lot of the components that are now running in our Kubernetes clusters, they already create OpenTelemetry data. We also ingest Prometheus because a lot of the components that we run, a lot of the platform services are exposing Prometheus data, and that's what we automatically ingest. Full stack into Grail, and then we use our views and dashboards to really get an overview. Great for our platform administrators. Now, a couple of best practices, and I will walk with you through these best practices later on in the hands-on piece. One of the best practices is if you are building a platform, you want to know what is running on that platform in which version, who has deployed it. And that is true for the platform services like your Argo, like your Caverno, like your container registry, your Git, your Jenkins, whatever runs on it, but also the applications and services that your developers are deploying with that platform in the target environments. So for this, just as we want you to do it and use Dynatrace, you can enrich your deployments with release version information and also ownership information that will then show up in different places in Dynatrace, like the release overview, but also allows you to do targeted automation where you can send information to owners. If you deploy a new version and that version is bad, you can send a targeted notification to the team about that version having an issue. Next thing I have, and actually this comes from one of the examples from one of our teams here. Now at Dynatrace, we use different tools historically also for CI/CD, right? We still have a lot of Jenkins, which is a great tool. We are now heavily moving towards Argo. The cool thing is, however you deploy, Dynatrace will detect that there is a new deployment from these pipelines, whether it's Argo, Jenkins, GitLab, Azure DevOps, Flux, whatever it is, and we can then trigger workflows. One of the workflows we typically enforce when we detect a new deployment is to validate that new deployment based on objectives that we have. And for this, we have an app that's called the Site Reliability Guardian. I already created videos for that Guardian, where you can basically specify what type of dimensions of observability, what metrics, what logs, what traces should be analyzed to validate if a new deployment is good. And this happens completely automatically as part of a workflow that gets triggered when a new deployment comes in. And then the nice thing is, if we have ownership information, not only can we validate, we can also notify people, or we can notify the tools. We can tell Jenkins, this is a bad build or a good build. We can do a pull request again in case this is a bad build and you're following GitOps, and basically initiate a rollback. Or we can create a pull request to say, maybe let's promote this build to the next stage because it looks really good. What else do we do? Another couple of key best practices. What you see here is we have 219 synthetic monitors in Dynatrace, just in our platform, to monitor all of the critical components that are part of our own internal development platform. Whether it's Bitbucket, Git, our wikis, we have our Artifactory, right? These are all critical components. And you want to make sure that these critical components work as reliable and resilient as you expect from the applications that your developers are building. Because if Git is down, if your Jenkins is down, if your DevWiki is down, if any of your components and services and tools are down that your developers, your testers, your ops, your SRE need, then you have a problem too. And so with Dynatrace, we monitor and make sure through synthetic monitors that all of these systems are up and running. In case something is wrong, we get an alert. You don't have to wait until developers complain that, you know, checking in code is now all of a sudden impossible or very slow. Or our wiki, right? We are using Atlassian tools intensively internally. If that doesn't work anymore, right? We do proactive monitoring here. Another thing, what we do is we are looking at, we have dashboards for particular platform services. So for instance, from an monitoring perspective, right, you want to know, like this is an example, as you can see here from our container registry. We have monitors that validate that the container registry, the APIs that different tools are using to access the container registry are available and up and running. We also want to know how many people are actually using the registry. Our registry has some UI that people can go to see. We want to make sure that that UI is also running smooth. We also look at traffic. We also extract information from the registry, so we know how many pools, how many artifacts are uploaded. These are great usage metrics that we can extract fully automatically from these platforms, telling you as a platform owner how your platform is actually adopted. Right. Some more examples. Argo, as I said earlier, we're using Argo internally, so obviously we want to make sure that Argo is available. We want to make sure Argo itself is also secure. That obviously is true for every other product, but we also use our own AppSec feature, our application security feature, to make sure that we are always aware of any known vulnerabilities, whether it's the software that we build and deploy or the software that we use to build and deploy, so our supply chain. And we look at capacity metrics, and we also look at the resiliency of our dependencies. So Argo and other tools, you know, are very heavily relying on accessing Git. They're heavily relying on things like a Redis cache. So we are monitoring all of this, and we were providing dashboards for the people that feel responsible for, let's say, Argo, and give them not only the view, we also give them automatic alerts, and they use Dynatrace to make sure that that Argo or tools like Argo are available, are secure, have the right capacity, and the systems that they're interacting with, that they're depending on, that they're also working as expected. All right, yeah, and last on this one, right, as I said, we have a lot of these views. This is another one for Bit here, where we basically just say, hey, how are these systems used? Very important. You will have software that runs in your platform that consumes, obviously, network traffic, that consumes CPU. So this is great to figure out how is your performance. Do you need to scale? How do you need to size? But also things that you can see here on the right: licensed users, licensed valid days. You know, you also use Dynatrace to monitor these, let's say, non-performance and resiliency things, like, hey, when do we run? When do we need to restart and reissue our licenses? When do we need to renew things? So we put everything in one place and then give you full access, or give the owners full access to it. Another thing we use is Backstage. Backstage is a very prominent CNCF project from Spotify, our developer portal. And so what we do here, we are using Dynatrace log analytics with Grail to detect any misconfiguration or misusage, right? So the way Backstage works, we use it, for instance, for templating. And if a team puts out a template and development teams start to use these templates to build new applications and services, and those templates have a flaw, then a lot of people will be impacted. So we automatically detect this by looking at the error logs or the logs from tools like Backstage, and then highlight in case we see any anomalies. And this can either mean misconfiguration or also sometimes misusage. Great capability with Dynatrace to extract this information from, for instance, logs using our DQL query language. What else do we have here? Predictive capacity management is another cool use case that we do in our platform. So our platform, and I assume most of your platforms are the same way, right? It's we're running on some elastic infrastructure, and you want to have the right amount of infrastructure available not too much so that you don't overpay, but not too less so that you don't run into the performance issues. So what we are actually using, we're using Dynatrace workflows and the prediction capabilities that Dynatrace provides to, for instance, forecast when the right time is to scale up our disks or our compute. Right? In this case, we are looking at disk usage, or let's say disk availability, disk free space, right? And you can see here 20% free and it goes down. So we want to make sure we scale our disk storage, not when we are getting too close to zero, not when we are at 50, 60%, but we want to scale it at the right time. Now, the right time means scaling sometimes takes minutes, sometimes can take hours. And so what we actually then can do, we can predict when we're going to reach, let's say, the 10% threshold, and then we can count back how many hours that lasts. And if we say on average it takes 2 hours to scale the disks on a certain cloud vendor, then we can trigger the auto scaling. And whether we do auto scaling right away or whether we create tickets first, that then still cause somebody to then trigger an action. I have a lot of discussions with people that might be a little bit resilient in, do we really want to automate everything from the start, right? In this case, you can also start with automating the prediction, creating a notification to say, now it is time to scale, please scale. And if people then feel comfortable with this prediction, then they can fully automate it. Good. And last piece that I have here, platform success metrics. This is an ongoing effort to take all the data we have in Dynatrace from your Kubernetes platform, from your Argos, your Jenkins, your Flux, your GitLab, your GitHub, your Azure DevOps. And we are taking it, and we have all this data in Dynatrace, and you can already create dashboards and notebooks yourself. But we're also currently working on building some out-of-the-box new apps on top of Dynatrace. That's effort that goes on between Dynatrace and also some of our partners and customers. So I'll show you later on in the hands-on some of the things you can do right away, because all the data is in Dynatrace and you can visualize it as you want, but there will be some stuff coming up. All right, now with this, I want to walk over to the hands-on piece of today's Observability Clinic. I hope so far you like what I explained. I hope this makes sense. If you have questions and feedback, if you challenge, if you say this doesn't make sense what I'm saying, you see this differently, please let me know. I'm always eager to learn on what you see out there and what your challenges are. But now let's go into what I see, what I've prepared. So platform observability. First of all, I want you, again, I'm sending you the link. Very important. I have a GitHub repository. I'm sending this again in the chat here. This is the GitHub repository. And let me actually open this up. The GitHub repository. This is the GitHub repository. It's the same GitHub repository I used in my last clinic that was called What is Dynatrace and How to Get Started. I may structure this a little bit in the future as this grows, but what you will see here is, first of all of the previous material that I've created with links to notebooks and dashboards on that tenant that all of you have access to, assuming you have a Dynatrace account. If you don't have a Dynatrace account yet, you can just easily sign up for a Dynatrace account by using this link. This is just a regular sign-up link, but it has a special tag on it so that we know internally that these signups came from some of my sessions. So the bit.ly DT trial, that's something that tells us that you came in from some of my tutorials. All right, so the new ones that I created are the notebooks for Observability Guide to Platform Engineering. And the one that I want to start with is the how to make your Kubernetes platform observable. So this here is the one that opens up here, right? So the thing is, if you open up these notebooks, and this is also interesting information maybe for you, because I really like using notebooks now to collect information, to collect links, and then put it on a shared environment, and then I create a share link. So what I've really done, every time you create a notebook, you can share it, and I have posted the public share link. This is the link that I posted here. So this, if you watch closely, this is a so-called share link. Whoever has this share link has read access to this particular notebook. Right? I did it read only because I wanted to make sure that nobody accidentally messes around with this. If you want to have your own version, right, you can always create a copy, or you can download this as a JSON and then just import it in your tenant as well. Now, let me quickly go through this. This is really about the observability guide to platform engineering. I put in a picture to remind everyone what we talked about today. This is kind of the reference architecture. I also put in here the link to my talk at KCD Munich. If you want to learn more about platform engineering, if you want to see my slides from my talk that I did there in the capacity of a CNCF ambassador, please have a look at this. Now, if you are new, or if you start with Dynatrace on your Kubernetes platform, then there's, as you probably know, maybe you're new to Dynatrace, there's different ways of ingesting data from Kubernetes. The preferred way is to install the so-called Dynatrace operator. A Dynatrace operator makes it very easy because you install the operator and that it gives you full stack visibility into your Kubernetes cluster. There's nothing else you need to do. However, there's a couple of settings. There's also different deployment options, whether you like the full stack or not. All of this is explained in the documentation, and we also have additional videos that explain the different models. As you can see here, I also have information here if you are, let's say you just want to ingest OpenTelemetry or just Prometheus or just logs, this is also possible. Now, in my tutorial here, I try to do a step-by-step guide. So typically how I start is I go to the Kubernetes app. Now, I'm doing this now on this particular Dynatrace shared tenant. Remember, this is a read-only tenant for everyone in the world. I will not be able to then actually connect or install the one agent. You also won't be able to do so, but you can do this on your own Dynatrace environment, right? But I wanted to use this to easily navigate and to show you how all this looks. One of the buttons here is the connect automatically. This is typically how you start. If you have a Kubernetes cluster, give it a good name. Also, give it a good group name. Groups really allow you to group together resources that are similar in nature, right? Whether it's pre-prod, prod, or whether you are organizing your Kubernetes clusters based on business units, that's up to you. But the group, as it also indicates here, right? There's also Kubernetes monitoring documentation. It allows you to better group all of your components. The rest, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. What comes out in the end is a so-called Dynacube YAML file that can then be further configured with additional features that you can turn on and off, or how you can basically configure the operator on what the operator should do. So for instance, how should the operator validate release versions, or how should it extract release metadata information? You can also validate what the operator should do, whether it should also be an active gate, whether it should also act in different capacities, right? So, and by the way, thanks for the questions that are coming in. The first question is this SaaS managed Dynatrace? What I'm showing you here, by the way, if you have questions in your live, please use the Q&A feature. What I am showing you here is the Dynatrace SaaS version. However, Kubernetes monitoring, all of this also works with managed. Same thing. The only thing that does not work with managed is, because in managed, you don't have the new Dynatrace UI experience. That means you don't have the notebooks. But everything else, all that is the steps for Kubernetes, for everything else, for most of the stuff that I show you today, whether it's ownership information, release version information, this also works on managed. Thank you for the question. If more questions are coming in, let me know. So deploying Kubernetes should be rather straightforward. Let me just quickly see what else I have here. Oh yeah, the Kubernetes app, as I said, it's accessible here. Another tip and trick that I have for you in the new UI, it's very easy to search. Control-K is your friend. So you can just search for Kubernetes. And obviously, you also get 2 apps that are specific for Kubernetes. anything, any dashboard, any notebook, anything else that might be available is easily accessible here. Other things that I have linked in that dashboard or in that notebook here, best practices on metadata for Kubernetes. There's like, as I said, there's ways to have Dynatrace operator automatically detect version information. We are detecting version information typically based on Kubernetes labels, and you can configure this in the DynaCube. So before you install the Dynatrace operator, you should have a look at the DynaCube CRD, that resource definition. There's a lot of capabilities that you can turn on and off, and everything is pretty well defined and configured here and explained in the documentation. So the whole version information, I think, is a really important one. You can also see here, you can specify if you have a different way on how you already define versions and product and stage information on your CRDs. If you're not using the default Kubernetes labels and annotations for version and the part of, you can also tell the one agent, hey, one agent, I want you to detect version information from a particular metadata annotation that you have, or maybe from a different label. The stage by default will take it from the namespace, but maybe you are detecting stages from it in a different way. So you can configure things like this through the DynaCube config file. And as you can see in the documentation, there is more information and more things that you can do. Also metadata enrichment if you are ingesting data, Prometheus data. If you are ingesting any type of data from Kubernetes through the ingest API, then we can also enrich it with Smartscape, with topology information, and you can configure all of this here. And so what I did in the notebook here, I just highlighted that these are best practices to take a look at it. The next thing that I have here, and thanks for the questions again that are come in. Yes, this session will be recorded and the presentation will be available on my YouTube channel. It will be available on Dynatrace University. And as you have registered for this webinar, you will also get an email once the recording is available. Sachin, you're asking why there is no notebook feature in managed, because we as Dynatrace have invested in the new platform capabilities around Grail, and Grail, our new backend, and on top of that app engine is only available in SaaS. And the reason why it's available in SaaS, because really we can shine and we can run this at scale with low costs thanks to the scalability in the cloud, right? And this is why these new capabilities are available for SaaS. Yeah? Notebooks, dashboards, workflows, Grail, TQL, these are SaaS capabilities. Hopefully some encouragement also to look into SaaS a little closer. I know it's not always as easy to move over right away, but have a look at what we have here. Other things, what else do we have? In my second step is Kubernetes settings. I think this is also very important. Once you have Kubernetes connected, once you're monitoring and observing your Kubernetes cluster, there's additional settings that I want you to take a look at, because these are some good practices to have a look at it. And actually, let me just show you. So we're going to the Kubernetes. Let me just open this again from the link here, right? To the Kubernetes app. In the Kubernetes app, you will see an overview of all of your monitored clusters. You should be able to see EKS, right? This is the one cluster that is currently monitored. This is, again, our demo environment, public demo that everybody has access to. And what you should be able to see, besides obviously seeing all of the monitoring data, on the top right, there's the ... This is where you can click on settings. And there's a couple of settings that I really recommend you to look at. First of all, the monitoring settings. This is where you can, for instance, enable annotated Prometheus exporter monitoring. So you can annotate your Prometheus exporters, and you can say they should be automatically pulled in from Dynatrace. There's also documentation for it. Monitor events is a very important one to actually ingest Kubernetes events natively. You can also filter if you want to. That means you could say you don't want to ingest all the events, but you want to exclude some, right? That's also possible. But yeah, this is a good one. Like what kind of default settings, how do you want Dynatrace to behave? Then also anomaly detection, very important. We have on different layers of the Kubernetes stack, we can automatically detect things like the Kubernetes cluster is not ready, CPU request saturation, memory request saturation. Most of these settings are on by default, but not all of them are, right? We've recently added a couple of new ones on Kubernetes nodes, on namespaces, on workloads. These are really interesting ones. So for instance, Dynatrace can alert you in case your deployments are stuck, your pods are stuck in pending. These are all lifecycle stages of Kubernetes objects where you may want to act on in case it happens. And when you turn these things on, Dynatrace will automatically create a problem ticket. With this, you can then trigger a workflow, send a notification, right? Make people aware so that they don't have to figure this out the hard way in case they see that their workloads are not working. So check this out. This is under the settings for Kubernetes. You can configure what type of behavior Dynatrace should have. Obviously, all of these things can be completely configured automatically. Very important. Let me go back once more. In Dynatrace, in settings, you always have on the right side, if wherever you are in settings, right? If I go back to my monitoring settings, you will also always find the ... here. And then you can get information about the schema, because this is our settings 2.0 schema that is accessible through our Dynatrace settings API. Nice thing is you also have here API, and this actually gives you already information about how you would read the value, update or delete the value with curl, bash, or comment. So you already get some nice pre-configured comments so that you can do automation. Obviously, what you would need is an access token. You will not get an access token on this demo environment, but on your environment, that's very easy, right? The question is, do we have an alert in Dynatrace when the Kubernetes cluster disconnects? Do you mean when Dynatrace is not getting any data anymore? Is that what you mean? I guess, yeah. So I think that's the evaluates the Kubernetes ready endpoint. If you turn this on and this doesn't work anymore, then this should actually be exactly, if I understand what you mean, what you're asking for. Yeah, or actually, or detecting monitoring issues is if for whatever monitoring doesn't work, right? The one agent operator has a problem, we don't get data anymore. Hopefully this answers the question. Good. All right. So let me go back to my notebook here. Step 1, step 2, the settings. Don't forget about the settings. Also, there's a lot of cool things here that I've also covered in the last Getting Started clinic. There are some core Kubernetes dashboards that you have access to. Same thing, go to the options and then open the dashboard. So let me go back very quickly. If you are here, and you can see that obviously this is the view that you have from a Kubernetes kind of cluster perspective. You have access to all the nodes and everything. But here, we also provide you direct access to a couple of things. Like we have a couple of out-of-the-box dashboards. These are still the classic dashboards. I think surely on SaaS, we will update them with some of the new dashboards. There will also be some new Kubernetes apps coming out, but these here give you a nice overview of the key metrics in a single space, either for one cluster, but if you have multiple clusters, you can, as you can see here, also take off the filter. Now in my environment, I only have one cluster, but in your environments, if you have many, then you can obviously use these filters very effectively. Okay, so check out these dashboards. All right, let me quickly go back to my slides so to make sure I don't miss and forget anything. So observing your Kubernetes platform, I think we just talked about this. Analyze some Kubernetes workloads. this is just a reminder of how you can very easily understand and access Kubernetes specific data. I covered this in my notebook, in my tutorial that I've also already covered in my last clinic that was called "What is Dynatrace and How to Get Started." So I wanna keep this really brief, but I want to show you in case you have not seen this. So the links are also here under the next steps, how to analyze Kubernetes clusters and workloads in Dynatrace. This is a document, again, it's a shared notebook, same concept as before. Just I'm giving a couple of indicators on how you can access your Kubernetes dashboards, how you can find your Kubernetes events, and so on and so forth. I also have, last time, I've also created a Kubernetes cluster overview dashboard in the new dashboard style that's also available. I also talked about how you can access workload information, right? How you can, for instance, find ad service, how you can see the workload metrics, and how you can get all the way down to error logs. While this is all explained, one thing has changed since my last webinar here, and I want to show you this because this is a really cool new search capability. If I press Ctrl+K and I enter and I start with the, I think it's the greater sign, you can easily search for workload, or you can type in any type of monitor category like Kubernetes workload. I hit enter. And now if I, for instance, want to search for ad service, which is one of the services here that I have, the search will automatically just search for ad service as a Kubernetes workload. Then I get the option, how do I want to open up? How do I want to view it? Right now I have one app installed that can view Kubernetes workloads. And voila, here I am. I am here on the ad service now, which is a deployment where I can see my resource analysis. I can see my pods. I can see my distributed trace analysis, right? These are all response time, failure rate, throughput from distributed traces. I could see events and logs. Now, if I go to a little longer time frame, let's say last 72 hours, then you have full access to all of this data. Then this is also where you can see actually there are events, and you can see typically once a day, roughly, we are restarting the pods and we are publishing something new. You have full access to those events. You can filter also from the logs. Everything is here. And what I always like to show, hey, if I'm responsible for this workload and I want to see, let's say, error logs, I just go in here, say, show me all the error logs, and then I automatically get access to all the error logs. And here, what do I have? I have a null pointer exception that happened. And I can even, with one click, get to my distributed trace. And this trace could either be a trace that comes from OpenTelemetry. It can also be a trace that comes from the one agent. It can be a trace that comes from both sides, parts of it one agent, parts of it OpenTelemetry, but you then have direct access to these traces. What I really like, as I said, is that everything is connected, every data piece is in context, and it's very easy to navigate. All right, so I want to show you, and I want to, because we have about 15 minutes left, could you please paste the link to the shared notebook you just showed? Of course, yeah. So this link here, this how to analyze Kubernetes, let me just copy that link. Here is that link. And remember, all of these here are also linked on my Git repositories. And I'm pasting this link again here as well, because here you have all of the links to my different tutorials from last time and also the new ones. And hopefully this answers the question. Good. Got a couple of more things prepared. Now very specific to platform engineering and a couple of things that I would like you to know and do as you start your journey of using Dynatrace for Kubernetes. Also for non-Kubernetes, but most of them are obviously very specific to Kubernetes, but not all of them. First is enable release observability. So this is another one of these tutorials. Let me also make sure to show you that link. So if I go back to my environment and also my Git repository, how to enable release observability with Dynatrace. I'm copying that link, I'm putting it into the chat, but you can also find them either here, or if you are in, remember, this is the kind of the Uber tutorial notebook that I created, the observability guide for platform engineering part 1. The how to enable release observability is the next notebook with a couple of tips and tricks on how to make Dynatrace aware of your releases. What does this all do? What this is really all about is to make sure that Dynatrace knows what type of version of a particular process or container or pod you're actually just deployed. Now, there's different options to provide release version information. One is through environment variables. So if you have a classical deployment, whether it's Windows or Linux, and you can specify environment variables on that process, you can just specify these environment variables on the process, and Dynatrace will pick it up and therefore will know that this is of this version, this build version belonging to this product and stage. The only field that is mandatory, by the way, is the release version. All the other ones are optional, but good to define if you have them. On Kubernetes, right, you will probably use Kubernetes labels. Labels means if you have a deployment, then through the labels, you can specify name, version, part of. Now, remember earlier I said this is the default way on how, when you enable Dynatrace on Kubernetes, how we're extracting version information. If you are using different default labels for version, for part of, for stage, for product, I think I still have it open here somewhere. In the first section, in the first tutorial, I talked about this configuration here, configure build label propagation. This is where you can tell Dynatrace to maybe, if I scroll down here a little bit, you can say, well, take the version maybe from a different field. So this is how you can override the default behavior of Dynatrace. By default, going back to my notebook now, by default, we're looking at this here, and this here. Now, there's one best practice. While we are extracting the version information on a pod level, if you are using Dynatrace One Agent to also capture distributed traces through using our instrumentation, we also recommend that you are passing the release version information also as an environment variable to that same container. Now, why is that? Because we can then propagate the version information on every individual distributed trace. So not only do we know what version is currently running, but as traces are captured, we are enriching these traces with version information. You can then do version-specific trace analysis, which is really cool. All of this is also explained in the doc that I've also linked here. Last option, so remember, either environment variable, Kubernetes labels, or you can also send deployment events from your CI/CD. This is also best practice. While you can already specify version information on the deployment, on the binary, on the deployment definition itself, we always suggest, if you're using tools like Jenkins, like GitLab, like GitHub, any other tools, you should additionally send an event to Dynatrace, because you can then tell Dynatrace even more about the deployment. So for instance, who approved that deployment? What CI, which pipeline actually did it? What is the Git commit? So here you can specify any name or any list of properties that will tell Dynatrace more about the version. And if you're specifying DT event deployment version, this will then define or even override any version information that we have on the binary itself. So this is how you send version information in. Now, where would we see all this data? One place to see it is in the release inventory. The release inventory is a view here, or an app. Again, this is also availably managed. I'm showing this in SaaS, also availably managed. You would see an overview. Now, in my demo environment here, we're currently just still building all of this out, and there's more stuff that will happen. We're just about to add version information. That means if I'm opening up the release inventory here, that release inventory app, it will not show release information, but I can switch to the demo mode, and the demo mode shows me how would this look like in case you have release version information defined. As I said, this is the public playground tenant. We are currently extending this, and there will soon also be a version information just by default there. But you can always go back and forth, and you can actually see how this looks like. So Dynatrace knows which version of which release of which component is currently deployed in which stage belonging to which product. And there's many other capabilities that we have here as well. So this is it for the release inventory. Very simple, very easy, very powerful. And then the question is, how can you query release information? You can also query it through through DQL. I just gave you the DQL statement here that allows you, for instance, to fetch from all process group instances those where let's say the version information is on, and then you get an overview of entity by tag name. This is something you can just take and execute on your own environment where you have version information. As I said, on this environment here, I don't have the version information, but trust me, this works and it will give you the output. Good. Let me just validate. What else do we have here? We have a couple of more things to do. Define ownership. Ownership is another very important topic. And I see another question is coming in. Is the release version detection similar for Docker Swarm as it's in Kubernetes? Yeah, I mean, the release version information really works on any process that we have. For Kubernetes, we just have an additional capability to pull in information from your Kubernetes labels and annotations. But remember what I also showed you, you can specify the version information as an environment variable on that container, on that process that runs within your container. And that's what I would use for anything else that is not on Kubernetes. Just use the environment variables and it works just as well. And this is also true for Docker Swarm. Exactly. Yeah. So use the environment variables for your launch scripts in your containers. Ownership, very important. Because if you're building a platform and many people are using your platform and they're deploying things, you want to know who deployed what, which team is responsible for it. So for this, I have another tutorial. Let me go back here. Just close a couple of things here that I had opened earlier, right? So that makes it a little easier to navigate. So I'm sending you the link again, how to define ownership in Dynatrace. Copy the link, go into the chat. Here we go. The same link should also be part of my Uber dashboard that I had earlier. If I scroll all the way down, there were a couple of things here, like the release observability. We did this. Now the ownership. So let me open up ownership. Here, I collected all the information on how to push ownership information to Dynatrace. That means what we really want is we want to know on a workload, on a process, on a service, who owns it. And I have linked here the documentation and also a video where we talk about ownership-driven observability. Very quickly, best practice is, again, on Kubernetes to do it via labels. So on a deployment here, as you can see, you can specify DT owner, and you can specify a so-called team identifier. You can also have multiple teams because you may have a component that is owned by multiple teams, but every team has different responsibility. Maybe one team has security responsibility, the other one development, and another one operations responsibility. You can also specify it through environment variables, because in the end, it's really just tags what this will convert into. So you can use the DT tags environment variable or DT custom props in combination with auto tagging rules. Or you can also do this manually by looking at this in the doing this in the screens. Now let me quickly show you a couple of things. First of all, should have linked to this here. I forgot about this in settings, and this is all explained in the documentation as well. First thing you need to do is you need to define teams. Under settings, there's a setting section called ownership, and this is where you can specify your teams. You will see here that I have 3 teams: Team Ninja, Team Key Development Team, and Infrastructure Team. On each team Each team has a unique team identifier. This one is called Ninja. And then you can do different things. You can specify responsibility. This is really just to define what is this team and additional information about their team. So where can I find this? In this environment, let's go back to my workload that I had open up earlier, the Kubernetes workload add service. That's the one I really like to use because it's the one that has ownership and SLOs and everything specified. So here I can see the add service. I can click on owners, and this is where I can see these two teams are assigned as owners to this particular component. I can see it here on the screen, but as you will also see from the documentation and the video that I've linked, you can also use this as part of a workflow. If a problem happens, let's say on add service, the workflow can say, can extract the ownership information like the email or the Slack channel, and then send that team who is responsible for this component a message. So nothing hard-coded, but everything based on configuration. You can also add ownership here, right? And in the end, what I mentioned, it's all properties and tags. In the end, it's all DT owner tags, right? So all the data that Dynatrace extracts will be converted into a tag that's called DT owner, and you can have multiple of those. Very cool, very powerful. Let me go back to my notebook here. My ownership has just too many screens open, right? Let me just see here. Let me close a couple and then go back to my ownership piece because I have one more thing that I want to show before we close it out. In the ownership tutorial, if I scroll further down, I also have information on how you can query ownership information using DQL, because remember, all of the data that Dynatrace has is also queryable through DQL. So I can, for instance, query all of, in this case, cloud applications. So these are all the workloads where there's a tag on it, for instance, with Ninja. And here I executed it earlier, right? I can run the query here, and I can see there's 3 front-end calculation service and add service that are owned by Team Ninja. So give me all of the workloads where there's tag specified, so is not null is a good practice, and where there's a tag with the owner Ninja. And then as a result, I want to see all the tags. So that's why I want to see maybe there's some other owners as well. Very easy. And you can combine this. You can say, give me the CPU of those entities. Give me the number of errors they had. It's really powerful because all this data is in Dynatrace, and you can query and connect this data through DQL for whatever use case you have in mind. Okay. Perfect. So I got one more thing for you. And this is the how to analyze DORA with Dynatrace, the DORA metrics. I'll post that link as well over in the chat. Again, this link is on the GitHub repository. Everything is there. So I will quickly walk through this. DORA are the DevOps metrics, and what we can do with Dynatrace, if you let us know about deployments, then we can calculate a lot of these deployment metrics for you. These DORA metrics for you. Again, step-by-step instructions. Some of these I have already covered because some of these integrations actually fulfill and feed different use cases. One of the things we want you to do is sending a deployment event to Dynatrace. This can be done either through a custom deployment event. This is similar to the version detection, what I mentioned earlier, or through a BIS event. And what I've done here, I have copied a couple of JavaScript pieces that you can know that we internally also use for demo purposes to simulate, to send in BIS events. So all of this here just shows how you can send a deployment event to Dynatrace. And the nice thing is we can then analyze those events again through DQL. So for instance, give me all of the custom deployments over the last 24 hours. Or give me those and split it by timestamp every day. I want to see how many deployments I had. Another thing is we typically want to connect a deployment event with the Site Reliability Guardian. I talked about the Site Reliability Guardian. That's an option to validate your deployment that can be triggered when the deployment event comes in. You can then query the results of that guardian through DQL, because the guardian itself, again, is creating events when the guardian is finished. And some examples on the bottom here, give me all the business events that are created by the guardian and split it by the status, how many errors, how many fail, and so on. You can also then do the, one of the DORA metrics is time to restore service. Here, our proposal is to look at the Davis detector problems and look at the total duration of these problems, and then look at them over time. And another thing that we have learned, because in the DevOps space, people talk about elite, high, and low performers. Here we give you the queries to say how many of my problems are handled very fast, how many take a little longer, and how many take really long. So this is kind of like, you can say, how mature are you as an organization? Are you elite? How many tickets are closed very fast? How many take between a minute and an hour? And how many take longer than an hour? And what we are currently working on, while you can query all this, you can put this on your dashboards, on your notebooks, wherever you want. We're currently working on also providing some out-of-the-box apps here that make this even easier for you. And you can then also connect external tools like your Git, your build pipelines, and so on. All right, with this, I'm already a little over time. Just want to make sure I didn't forget anything. The DORA metrics, there's so many more use cases out there. Don't forget about the Git repository with all the different links. If you have feedback, please let me know. Always go to community.dynatrace.com. Reach out to me whenever you have questions. Yeah, with this, I know it is already more than an hour, and I assume some of you may have meetings, but if you have any other questions, I'm very happy now to stay for a couple more minutes and answer questions that you still have. Yeah. So feel free to use the Q&A feature. Very happy to answer any questions. Yeah. The first question, are there significant disadvantages of relying on Prometheus exporters for data as opposed to one agent? So, I mean, the advantage of the one agent is it does not only capture, your metrics, but also your logs and your traces, your events. So the one agent does a lot of additional things that Prometheus does. What we see, if you are, and I'm not a Prometheus expert, so there's other folks that are probably better to me to answer this, but from my perspective, if you have Prometheus data, it means somebody developed a certain component. They thought about what type of metrics is important for that component. Think about Argo, what I showed you earlier. A lot of these are Prometheus metrics that are specific to Argo. And therefore, it makes sense to pull them in. Now, whether you pull them in from Prometheus directly, or whether you're using things like the Open Telemetry collector and have the collector pull in Prometheus metrics and then send it to Dynatrace, that's up to you. From an easier perspective, this is what I see is the one agent does just a lot of things automatically without you having to worry about. But it really a little bit depends on what type of setup you already have. Yeah? That's the next one is a good question. Some folks use Grafana on top of Dynatrace. Why is that? That is a good question, I think, because historically, and we just had a meeting today with a large user of ours, they have the same thing. It's historically grown for some, where Grafana has been used as an Uber dashboard for many different data sources. And Dynatrace, however, has moved into that space of being able to monitor all of your data, and therefore not only your metrics, not only your traces, but also your logs and your events. So what you've seen with Dynatrace, you have all the data in one place, and you have a very powerful query language. You have a very powerful visualization. And what we also give you, we give you capabilities in Dynatrace through our extension options and even through JavaScript that you can write as part of a dashboard to pull in data on demand to run and feed your dashboards. So I think if you look at Dynatrace now, then I think we need to find a good argument why not to use Dynatrace for all of the data you have in your organization. This is my obviously biased opinion, but yeah, I think Dynatrace should be the place where all of your data lives, and where also all of your data is analyzed, drives automation, and if you still need to look at this, where you use Dynatrace for your dashboarding. But I think for Grafana, it's probably, Grafana is a great product. I mean, don't get me wrong. And it has been there for a while, and I'm sure many people have worked on it. But look at Dynatrace, because we can do the same, and we can do it across all of the data, and we store the data in the backend very efficiently with Grail now. And we have all the other capabilities like automation. You can build your own apps. And so check this out. Good. All right. So the recording, as a reminder, will be made available on YouTube. It will be, just stop sharing here quickly so that you can see me. It will be made available on YouTube, on Dynatrace University. You will also get a reminder email when the recording is post-processed. I will also push it out on LinkedIn whenever I have it available. And yeah, make sure that you are not forgetting about these links, and give me feedback. That would be good. On most of these dashboards and notebooks, I put in an email, devrel@dynatrace.com, and also on each of these notebooks with a preset subject for the email, so I know where you saw, like where you have a question, maybe in which tutorial. So do me a favor and use this type of feedback channel. All right, with this, late here, late evening, sun is down. All good, and see you next time. Bye-bye.